So discovery, innovation, and crisis. Right? So when we think about innovation, there are different ways to innovate. It's not one simple thing, right? We can take what we have, make improvements, make marginal gains, or, infamously they talk about the S curve of development, where you get some extreme advancements, then those advancements slow, and then maybe there's a breakthrough and you get additional advancements. But the innovation I'm speaking of is a true discontinuity, right? So we say, there's no single curve. There's a break. It's almost a quantum leap in knowledge and perspective and understanding. And we are developing tools that might enable more and more of that. But the reason I bring up that form of innovation is because if we are going to address what I call existential crises, we have a lot of issues to address when it comes to either food scarcity, water, climate, obviously, environmental issues in general. There are a lot of things that need new thinking and new innovation. And the way we're going now, we're not going to get there. There's no incremental innovation and development that's going to solve a problem. And I think that when you take that innovation, and we'll talk about what it means to really try to spark that innovation, you need a commercial discipline. You need efficiency, you need effectiveness, and you need to have competition so that you can drive down costs, you can innovate more effectively, you can motivate for additional innovation. There's a great example. The state of Texas is now a very green economy. Why? Not because they care about climate change or even think about that, but they do think about economics, right? It's cheaper to have wind power than fossil fuel power. That's simple, right? That is the kind of discipline I'm talking about, that you have a fundamental innovation, but that innovation really has an economic discipline to it, which enables commercial development, which enables more effective deployment. And so when we think about new thinking, right? So we have intractable problems. We have the issues that I addressed with, water, the environment, pandemics, disease, all these things. And we simply can't withstand one crisis after another. Look what the pandemic did to the world. Look what climate change is doing to various environments around the world. So we have what I would describe as significant existential crises, right? So the current trajectories don't work, right? We just can't sort of say, well, we have some solutions on the table, let's just make them better, right? And I think an example that gets a lot of press, but I think is fundamentally inefficient, is electric vehicles, right? As much as you might like an electric vehicle, it's not green. It doesn't really solve the problem. People want personal mobility for sure. Is it better than just a fossil fuel engine? Well, to a degree, but manufacturing still has a significant carbon footprint. Transportation has a significant carbon footprint. You got to generate that power somehow, and current sources of power do not solve any true environmental issue. So while we've got targeted legislation that says we want electric vehicles, we should step back and say, well, that's current thinking. Maybe there's a better way to think about that. As an example, maybe a hydrogen vehicle might actually be a better solution. I mean, there's ways that we need to think differently, right? And so we need new knowledge. And where does new knowledge come from? It comes from basic discovery, right? Without a specific purpose. The history has shown that some of the most significant innovations and discoveries, initially people were like, well, so what, right? And of course, I love to tell the story about Faraday basically developing the electric motor that generates electricity, Queen Victoria saying, well, it looks clever, but what are you going to use it for, right? Well, electricity powers the modern world, but we didn't know it at the time. And there are all sorts of examples where history has shown people discover things ranging from the transistor to the laser to other things that really have fundamentally changed our lives. And yet at the time, we didn't really know it. So it was basic discovery. Even the vaccines in the current pandemic, it was basic discovery of messenger RNA technology, other advancements in life sciences that enabled people to think, well, if we can decode the genome to this virus, we may be able to come up with a vaccine relatively quickly. And we did, right? So that's that basic understanding. But that was applied to is commercial discipline. While Faraday's electric motor was very clever, it took General Electric, then Westinghouse, and actually Nikola Tesla developing alternating current. It took all of these advancements with commercial discipline and competitive companies to really enable that to be cost effectively distributed. And the same is true with vaccines even, right? So you need to have some commercial discipline that enables an opportunity. That opportunity not only drives down costs, but creates a significant economic opportunity. Now, for some reason, that seems to be a bad word these days. Like, well, we're going to create value via innovation. Well, if you've innovated and you've created value, somehow you might be a bad person. I mean, there's some silliness to that, which I don't really want to get into. But the idea is something unique with commercial discipline that has a significant benefit to the world in general and provides a real valuable service. Well, that company will be valuable. Those founders who took those risks are going to capture a lot of value, and we should applaud that. All right, so what we want, as I mentioned, is we want government cooperation. For sure, we need research budgets. We need cooperation with government science, innovation science bureaus, but we don't want direction. Like the CHIPS Act, the requirement for electric vehicles in California, this is targeted legislation that I think leads to inefficiency. We're saying, well, we want innovation in integrated circuits, and we've got massive computing power needed for artificial intelligence and other things that can lead to tremendous innovations because of the computing power. But we want all that to be here in the United States, and unless you source it in the United States, unless you manufacture it in the United States, we're not interested. Well, that creates a global inefficiency. And so now we've fragmented the world. So now the Europeans have to do things, the Chinese have to do things, and yet we're all integrated economically, and we haven't recognized that. This is not the 1940s, the late 1940s, where you could draw a bright line and say, this is the world. They manufacture and develop over here, we manufacture and develop over here, and there's no interaction. Well, that's just not true. We have a lot of research, development, cooperation, and that cooperation leads to great innovations. And that, because of targeted legislation, is a fundamental mistake to block that or to restrict that. And so we do need government budgets. We need to fund basic research. We need research allocations. We need universities getting grants. We need that kind of basic research. But the outcomes are, well, let the best do their best and see what happens. That has always been the best strategy. And for some reason, people are forgetting that these days. So unfettered research, but with that research, we want access for companies who can compete. Right? So again, let's go back to transistor technology. Let's go back to some basic innovations that have led to dramatic improvements in life and in our capability in our industry. Well, that enabled, and the internet is another great example, right? So we have DARPA arranging the internet and that communications system. But then what happened is we allowed that to be commercially available. So now companies could use that to compete. There was competitive discipline, commercial discipline, and we got much better products and services. So doing basic research, but then enabling that as a benefit that can go to the market and then let the most effective performers do the best work. And that's the example. The internet, the other great example is the National Institute of Health, NIH. They do basic scientific research, and then that scientific research is just accessed by life sciences companies to develop very useful, effective products. We need to fund more of that so that we can have greater opportunities for advancements in development. Right? So yes, there is a crisis. And so when we look at energy, one of the things that we have to think about is it's not just, well, let's have solar, let's have wind, maybe we have nuclear, we probably should, but we've delayed that for a lot of reasons. So what we really need is a new networking solution. Right? So I'd say energy is a networking problem as much as anything else. That requires a very interesting way to integrate sources of energy with uses of energy, and it's a system that doesn't exist globally, and it will be the real bottleneck to creating more efficient energy globally. And let's be clear, the energy market will actually be determined by what happens in Asia, South Asia, and South America. Right? While the energy market is driven today by the United States and Western Europe, Japan as well, what's going to happen is Asia and South America are going to write the rules, because these are people that want power. Power is prosperity. Prosperity is individual freedom, it's development, it enables better lives. People will want power. We're not going to conserve our way out of this issue, right? So this crisis requires unique ways of thinking about software as well as hardware, as well as energy sources. So if you develop better solar panels, better, wind turbines, all these things, well, you've got to get that power somewhere. That needs to be networked and probably in a new, unique way of looking at the software. The same thing with life sciences, right? We know we're going to have other global pandemics. We know we're going to have all of these issues that are going to come up, from out of nowhere, who knows? But, a virus really doesn't care about borders, doesn't care about cultures, doesn't care about political regulations, right? A virus will spread, and we are more and more vulnerable through our global interactions, as we've seen, right, just in the last few years. So what do? We have to enable better research, better vaccine development, better drug development, better sources of hygiene, better sources of handling sort of environments and markets that could be more dangerous to us, that can cause these kinds of things. All of that requires cooperation, requires fundamental research, requires innovation, and all of that can be enabled by governments, but it's governments cooperating and it's governments bringing down regulations and restrictions, not bringing them up. And so you have universities where there's, extraordinary research happening. A lot of the work, let's say in CRISPR, gene editing, these kinds of things that can enable unique therapies to be developed to handle intractable diseases. Well, the Broad Institute at Harvard and MIT has done great work there. Berkeley's done great work. Globally, there's been great work. That also requires that fundamental research and then competition to bring out, the best companies, the best opportunities, the best solutions. That is sort of the road that is most effective for us. Specific targets are a mistake. Let's fund, when you apply for a grant, what's your target? What are you going to do with this? Well, basic discovery should be for the sake of basic discovery. And that's a fundamental mistake that people are making. So when we look at things, again, these are not small problems, right? And there's a great analogy when you think about great technical innovation. When we had World War II, well, we were in a crisis. We were in an existential crisis. We thought, somebody might blow us up sometime soon, right? Well, that created a lot of extraordinary innovation. And it wasn't just the hydrogen bomb. It wasn't just, it was the atomic bomb, but then later the hydrogen bomb. And it wasn't just that kind of weaponry, but it was fundamental research in communications, in technologies that have enabled, great advancements today, right? So, there's that same crisis that exists today, only it's not being taken so seriously as a crisis, but that will spur this kind of innovation if we do it right, right? So we had cooperation before because we had a common enemy. Well, now those enemies, well, look, it's climate, it's food scarcity, right? It's pandemics, it's an environmental crisis, right? We're not going to solve that with current thinking. We're not going to solve that with fragmentation. We're not going to solve that by thinking that somehow these solutions can be contained within certain economies, right? So it's discovery, it's innovation, and it's entrepreneurship. At the end of the day, it is government that can help, but it is private industry and it's entrepreneurship that actually will deliver these solutions. No, that's the way it's going to be. There may be thoughts that, well, government can do certain things. Well, they can do certain things, but they can set a trajectory. They might be able to apply resources for some basic research that is the spark for something innovative. But at the end of the day, it's private capital and private industry. And so, we're seeing a trend in the market where, we had these rose-colored glasses, like, well, technology can accomplish anything. We can do all these things. We had, big valuations for companies. Now we have doom and gloom. Well, now nothing's going to work, right? Well, put that aside and think about, as I've written about the 10-year horizon. Think about where we really want to go. And it is discovery, it's innovation. And we have to kind of think long-term, not short-term. In the short term, we're thinking about how can we regulate this? What restrictions do we need to put on innovation in technology especially, but innovation even in life sciences. And then we're harassing people who are trying to basically cooperate and coordinate and create better images and products, right? So we've got some real issues to deal with, right? And so we have to think about what matters and be willing to lose. And this is where entrepreneurship comes in and government does not, right? Government is politics. Government does I want to look good. And we've seen all these, nonsensical hearings where people really don't know what they're talking about, trying to regulate innovation in science. And we go back to that great quote from Carl Sagan, where he said, more and more science and technology is permeating our lives, and we are governed by people who have no understanding of science and technology. We continue to be even more so governed by people who have no understanding of science and technology and what's really happening. And the possibility, even today, President Biden comes out and says, well, AI needs to be regulated because it could be bad or something bad could happen. Well, something bad could always happen. That's no reason to restrict what could be one of the most innovative fundamental tools that we need for these very innovations that I'm describing, right? So once again, politics, even if you do understand it, you won't profess that understanding because somehow that seems to be bad now, right? Calling someone an Einstein is now an insult, which is kind of crazy, right? But what we have to do is we have to be willing to fail. Entrepreneurs are willing to fail. Private capital is willing to fail because the successes are great successes. So in the venture capital world where I'm involved, if we invest X, well, we could lose X. But if we win 10X or more. So we are willing to lose because we know if we get it right, we get it spectacularly right. And unfortunately, there's political pressure that says, well, that somehow is a bad thing. Well, it's not a bad thing because you have to have innovation, capital, a willingness to lose, and that creates the best outcomes. And so that also enables creativity. The most creativity really does come from private capital using this kind of the paranoia that I talked about from the World War II. That paranoia created great innovation, right? We should have that same sense of paranoia, right? And there is an urgency for solutions, but unfortunately, urgency is mistaken for, well, just yell and scream, right? So, people throwing pies at the Mona Lisa. Well, that's not doing anything. Creating awareness is one of the silliest things I've ever heard. We're aware of what's going on. People giving speeches and yelling and screaming that things are bad. Well, you're not offering a solution. So you're actually part of the problem. You're a distraction. You're just saying, we don't like things, so we're going to make a mess. Well, fine, but that's not helping anyone, right? What really helps people is understanding that we need to focus on solutions, and those solutions should have rewards, right? And as I've been advocating, we need discovery for the sake of discovery. And then when you release that to the world, smart minds think about great ways to apply it. And there's a great current example. Think of ChatGPT, right? So ChatGPT is this AI tool, of course, right? So it's getting a lot of bad publicity because of, sort of silly responses. But the good publicity to that is it's a tool that now the world is getting a hold of. And there are some researchers at MIT that I've worked with, including David Martinez, who heads up systems engineering. And he's saying he uses ChatGPT as an effective research tool and much more effective than anything he's used before. It's people like that we want to give energy and tools to help enable discovery, and that is a tool that gets released to the world. That's more effective than any other strategy, to release it, let effective minds go to work in academia, but also in business, right? So good, effective products using tools that are released that can enable better research, better work, better information, better processing. All of this really matters, right? And so as I'm saying, let the best do the best. And so when you let the best do their best, you have cooperation with business and state. I'm not saying there should be a bright line, but the state should not protect the business. We should enable competition. We should enable cooperation globally. Look, I've done a lot of business with China over the years, and when we look at a business or a country that is 25% of our GDP as well by cooperative work, to say suddenly, well, they're our enemy, we can't trust them, we can't work together. You're creating a disruptive negative force to our economy, to our innovation, and you're getting in the way of potential solutions to these very problems. And that should be disturbing for everyone. Political speeches get people elected, but these are people who really don't understand what's going on with business, what's going on with innovation, what's going on with technology, and those are fundamental mistakes, right? So it should be policy for the important, as I describe it, which means these solutions matter. We need to address these problems, go at it, right? And wherever those solutions come from, and they should be more cooperative. It is like we're in a war, right? And in a war, you have no enemies when you're fighting the same enemy, right? So we're fighting specific issues that are crises. We have no enemies, but we're viewing the world in a more fragmented way, a more paranoid way, and it's destructive, and I'm advocating the opposite of that. The lone voice may be yelling and screaming against a giant wall, but I still believe we have to think this way, right? So we can't control things, and I say, let's all build a wall and we'll be safe behind it. Well, China tried that in 200 BC. It didn't work so well. It doesn't work well now. We can't build walls and say we're going to be fine, right? So we can't moderate competition. As we said before, the rewards for great innovation are extraordinary, for sure, right? But trying to moderate that, trying to say, well, it should be shared by everyone. Well, innovation should be competitive. Innovation is difficult. And, Andy Grove saying only the paranoid survive. Well, the innovations that came out of Intel were driven by that sense that we need to innovate because someone else will. And that will always drive better and better competition, better results, better outcomes for us. And that's what we need, right? So we need these sustainable solutions. And thinking of an industrial policy like the CHIPS Act is kind of silly, right? So we'd say, well, we need all these innovations, we need this technology, we need the processing power to enable artificial intelligence, we need all of these things, but let's control it because we want that to be American made, right? Or where Chinese made or French made, right? That it's such fundamental silliness. When we think about examples of closed economies versus open economies, we don't have to look too far. I mean, look at East and West Germany and what happened there, and look at North and South Korea and what's happening there today. One policy that's closed and we do everything internally and everything is our own responsibility, that leads to suffering, disaster, inefficiency. When we're open and we're competitive, we can feed the world, right? We've got feed the world with technology, with innovation. We have a standard of living that is among the highest in the world. It's a very simple case. Any other thinking has just been discredited so often, and yet in a time of crisis, essentially, it's being discredited again, but people are ignoring it. So we need to have the free competition, free flow of capital, and excellence for the winners, right? So it's new thinking for these intractable problems that are required. We are in a crisis, and that requires discovery, innovation, and entrepreneurship will be the solution. It is these kinds of disruptions that not only create great solutions, but create great value. And that is significant motivation for the creation of solutions, right? So it's that creativity, letting the best do the best. Motivating is great. Managing and controlling is not. That's a fundamental mistake, and we shouldn't be making that. So that's the way that we can create great value through disruption, and it's disruption in communications, in energy, in life sciences, in artificial intelligence, which is applying to all applications. This is where the future really should be, in an unfettered manner. And again, let the best do the best and let the rewards come.